the first time you saw your work on in Peru and Latin on was the Holocaust is a million easy artist who was happier in him from Guinea, Mary, and Netflix. He also members at my artist image like a baby people group for easy years. I'm part of it. They let them Hayley Adams. What was it for you in India?
Thank you for such a warm comment to introduce me into your segment. I just wanted to say that first of all. The thing that inspired me, I think, whenever I grew up watching films, specifically content created by Pixar, there was something about anything they produced that resonated such a beautiful world to me, and all these cool characters and breathtaking environments where, interestingly enough, I thought that I wanted to be the person that moved all the characters like an animator. But when I eventually found myself in my education taking a university course in digital animation, I spent a lot of time actually making all the sets and all the little models and props that you use to build out all these environments and buildings. So it interestingly started as one way, but it transitioned into something else that I found myself just falling in love with the process of spending all this time making all these detailed models and almost building a story just from like individual pieces. And it almost unlocked this really cool version of storytelling that I didn't think existed until I accidentally kind of found myself in that area.
How, how did you go from learning the basics to working on many horrible projects?
That's a great question. So, my education started within university, and I was quite privileged that my tutor at the time, he himself worked on, I believe it was the maybe the second, but definitely the third Lord of the Rings film. And I think he was a visual effects artist on it. So within the time of university, I was able to learn the foundations of how to use Autodesk Maya, which I believe is the software that you also use, which is really cool. And it wasn't until I got into my first job into a visual effects studio called Cinesight as a facility runner. It was around that point I was able to alongside my job roles, interact with professional artists and start asking them about certain ways how they use software. And then I would say the real pivoting point for me that took me from like the hobbyist point to the professional point was a company that I worked at after them. And I was assigned a senior 3D modeler to shadow me while I worked as a layout artist during my time on Star Wars and Marvel films. And he was really able to completely expand the mindset required to make something that you need for a film, and teaching core principles like how the way how something's made in real life is how we make it in film, which is crazy because when you think of shows like Star Wars, for example, that have the big massive ships, those ships are built to the same size that they would be in real life, and planets are the same size as they would be in real life. It's absolutely mind-boggling. But definitely the opportunity of being in the industry and working alongside artists on these massive projects, that's been the turning point on my journey to transition from kind of hobbyist to professional standards.
Do you remember the first time you saw your was on TV?
I do, yes. It was the first project that I saw on screen of mine was Captain America Civil War. And I remember being so excited to watch that in the cinema with my friends. And I got them all to buy tickets. And funny enough, actually, we all went there ready to watch the film. And when we got there, someone was already sitting in our seats, and we just bought standard seats. So with politely asking them, "Oh, I think you're in our space," and these people were not moving, not at all. They were very stubborn, and they said, "Nope, these are apparently our seats. You guys have got to move." So we ended up getting the staff to um, basically ask them very politely, "Can you move out of our seats? We have paid for them." They weren't moving, but we ended up getting upgraded to premiere seats, which was so cool for the first film. And I was so excited because I was telling my friends, like, "Oh, these are the parts that I've worked on," and like, "Oh, we're getting up to the point in the story." And I just had this overwhelming feeling of warmth and excitement when I saw my shots appear on the big screen for the first time, because when we're working on this stuff, we're working on it sometimes for weeks at a time. And those shots, they disappear in like seconds, but it's such an intensely proud feeling seeing my work and knowing exactly what I've done behind those shots. Like, it was definitely a feeling that it never goes away, but the first time I saw it, it I don't think I really have words to describe how cool of a feeling that really was.
What did that moment mean to you?
What did that moment mean to me? It, for me, felt like it's interesting because I never necessarily aspired to much at the time. It was very much thinking when I went through school that I would get a very normal kind of job role. Um, didn't know that my career was going to take the trajectory it did. So for me to, in that moment, realize that I had somehow managed to find myself on a career path where I sat on a computer, moved some pixels, and this is being seen by millions of people. Like, it gave me such a strong sense. I think of like being proud of myself, of how far something that I can do and collaborate with other artists can have such an impact. And for me, I think one of the most heartwarming things I find, especially afterwards as well, is when you see a little kid afterwards get excited about the film that they've just watched, and knowing that you helped tell the story of that superhero doing that really cool thing. And it's one of those things that it means so much that, like, its film at the end of the day is not saving lives, but it can still have such a strong capacity to affect the lives of so many people in such a positive way. And it's really cool. So it definitely meant a lot when I saw that, and knowing that it was only just the start as well was really cool.
What was if good for yeah, yeah, about it big visual movie.
I would say for me, it's the amount of people that are truly required, because often, uh, since I've started working on films and projects, I'll tend to sit and watch all the credits roll, and knowing that not every name is shared for sure. There's normally a lot more people that are involved, almost in a very direct way, that still aren't given a credit listing. But the other thing I think as well that people kind of don't always realize is there are points when the director will give the studio an idea that they want executed, and we don't know how we're going to do it until we all sit in a room together and go, wait, okay, we need to pull off this idea. The director wants it this way. We have this material, but this is something that we haven't done before. And everyone just sits together in a room, bouncing ideas across one another, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. And films are, I would say, as anyone who has made their own projects, or they've gone to university or college, some sort of structured program, that chaos that we experience on a hobbyist level is the exact same when you get to the big film level as well. It's not like we all go there knowing exactly what we're doing. It's still equally as we're all just butting our heads together, and eventually a film kind of comes out of it. So it's a fun level of chaos that always keeps you on your toes.
How are those players labeled and the most of a well
Oh, that's a tricky question. That is very tricky. I think so. The first one that comes to mind, because my career in film has bounced between a few different departments, but the one I would say that sparks the most with that is probably the Star Wars film Solo. So that one, it was while I was a match move and layout artist, so I wasn't quite creating the 3D models. That was more camera work back then. But there is a sequence in the film that is revolving around a train heist, and there is a part which does include slight spoilers. I do apologize. So pause the video, watch the film, I guess, if you haven't already. The train track, or sorry, the train falls off of the train track, and then everyone is focusing on this one carriage that's being flown across the sky. And there's a bit of a wrestle, a rough and tough, and unfortunately, the carriage does get dropped into a mountain. The plan was to take what was inside the train and fly away, but it goes kaboom. That sequence in itself, because I was assigned as a junior artist, I didn't really think I would get much responsibility in terms of like job roles that would play a bit of a significance on what it would look like in the film. But I was assigned the job of the moment that singular train carriage was in the sky to the point of it colliding in the mountain, that I had to work out the pacing of the cargo to go at the correct speed, which I think was about 60-ish miles an hour, maybe, and to get it across the mountainside in a way that still allows all the beats of the story to happen. Because in real life, it only took about 5-6 seconds to actually make the speed. But films, they love to chat, they have a dialogue, they're telling a story, so it's probably more like it's got to last about a minute and a half. So my job was figuring out the pacing to make sure that all the shots overlapped nicely to still fit in all the script that was required before the sequence ends. And that's kind of the closest I've had to like a lead role in a film segment. So to be given full reins and full trust on that, and to go, we trust you, just shoot everything so it looks pretty, and we don't get much overlap. I think that to me is probably the one that I'm the most proud of.
Well, or environment and water.
So, two parts to that question. The first one about how do I make time? I would say it becomes a bit tough because me personally, I've noticed that if I spend too much time in front of computer screens, I am prone to getting migraines. So I have to be very intentional with my screen use, and that can limit my time to experiment. So I would say most of my experimentation time is when I'm working live on a project, which that, to be honest, since I switched from match move layout and becoming a professional 3D modeler for shows, my skill set has increased massively from it. So luckily the job role does allow me to have a higher level of growth than what I would independently. The second question, I would say I do like environments, but my personal preference is probably making individual props. If I get the opportunity to work on a hero asset, which would be a model that has a significant impact to the story or something that a main character holds, those I find are really fun because especially when you work on shows that are meant for like big screens or streaming programs, you can really lose yourself in making all the tiny details within a model, and you can really double down on not just the way how the model looks, but also learning how it works. So one of the shows I worked on recently, which is out now, called Wolf King on Netflix, a TV series, that I was assigned to make quite a few of the weapons that are in that show. And I had so much fun reverse engineering how crossbows worked properly to make the bow not only look pretty and match the artwork that we was given, but to make sure it functioned properly as well. And having the opportunity, especially if it's a prop that you have an interest in, to have that little back and forth on a show to make sure that you're presenting it in the way how it's meant to from a functional standpoint, those are always really fun wins when you get those. So I'd say out the list, definitely props wins. I love characters, but my anatomy skills aren't quite strong enough to pull off characters to a professional level at the moment.
What software do you in the model?
The tools and software I use, so if it's for film specifically, I mostly stick to using Autodesk Maya. There is very occasional points when I have opened up Blender and required to use it, but these are more so in situations where a third-party vendor has in a part of the filmmaking process sometimes, especially when it's like animation, so Toy Story, that kind of stuff, you might get provided. It's worth prefacing, I didn't work on Toy Story, so this is just like an example film to help people visualize. We will get what's called like a block-in pass, sometimes called grey boxing, and this will be models that don't have a lot of detail, and they are there to represent the size of the model and how they're placed in the environment. So sometimes in different shows or different companies, the clients might provide us a file from Blender that it acts as a representation of what we need to make a high quality version of that would work for the pipeline of the company. So I reckon probably, I'd say 90% of the time for my job role, I'm using Autodesk Maya. About 7 to 8% of the time, just because of the type of props that I'm modeling, I'll use ZBrush. And then 3% of the time, I might have to open up Blender to extract from files to then take it into either Maya itself or maybe ZBrush if sculpting is the better way of creating the model.
For someone that what would the biggest value in your
I would say the internet is a very, very good starting point to get yourself immersed in 3D modeling to figure out if that's something that you want to do. The software I use is a paid software, so in terms of just getting started, Blender is a very good starting point, and it's a very powerful piece of software that can definitely enable you to experience all parts of the pipeline. So my job role, for example, was focused on a very specific part, which would be creating the models, but it's actually someone else's job to say paint or texture the models. So mine is literally just based on the appearance itself. The plus side with something like Blender is you can go through pretty much most of the stages of making a film or an animation yourself and figure out which part really takes your interest. So I would say YouTube content is probably the best to start with to see if it's something you want to invest further with. Say taking a an online course, a university program that might be local to you if you have anything like that, or if you find that actually, let's say in theory, you are into 3D modeling and hypothetically, like you want to go into Maya, absolutely, then either people like myself or specifically other people that are from the industry can offer content if your goal is to work in film. If not, absolutely, there is plenty of stuff on YouTube that you can search to figure out if it's something you want to fall in love in and just allow the skill to run away with itself, really.
And below are of the below is in the
I would say they help, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily a requirement. So I know people who have gone from completely different pathways and have found themselves into film. Some of them are a little bit interchangeable. So, for example, one of my work colleagues, he was an architect before he got into what he does now, which for context is more towards the motion capture side of things. So that in itself is quite different from the exposure you would ever really get as an architect. But I have known people that have come from digital marketing backgrounds as well that have transitioned into film. The plus side now, I think that there's a lot more understanding of it being a creative driven job role rather than necessarily something that you have to go to university, get a degree, have this. If you can show your skill set through your portfolio and you're able to explain that to someone, you know, when you get to the interview stage, I think there is a lot more trust in allowing people to transition into that career rather than like you need to have 3 years experience in this before you get to this before you get to that. So I'd say it can help, but if you don't have those skills, like it doesn't matter too much so long as you're kind of learning and understanding the principles of what's required for the job, then you're all good in my books.
what was 1 minute is you pay and it be me and how you want
As a beginner and how I overcame it, what challenge did I face?